Marcus Hill woke up early that Friday morning, the crisp autumn air wafting through his modest apartment. It was going to be an important day for him. As a final-year law student at one of the nation's top universities, he had worked tirelessly to secure a scholarship that would allow him to study abroad. Today, he was heading to meet his mentor to finalize the details. With a mix of nervous excitement, he donned a neatly pressed button-up shirt and slacks, then grabbed his bag. Little did he know, the day would take a turn that no amount of preparation could have braced him for. Driving through the city streets, Marcus hummed along to a jazz tune playing softly on the radio. His car, a reliable but aging sedan handed down from his father, cruised smoothly until he saw the flashing red and blue lights in his rearview mirror. Confused, he glanced at his speedometer. He wasn't speeding, and his registration was up to date. With a resigned sigh, he pulled over to the side of the road, rolling down his window as the officer approached. "License and registration," the officer barked, not bothering with pleasantries. His tone carried an edge that immediately set Marcus on alert. The officer, a stocky man with a buzz cut, peered into the car as if looking for something suspicious. "Sure, officer," Marcus replied evenly, handing over the documents. "Is there a problem?" The officer ignored the question, scrutinizing the papers, as his partner, a lanky man with a perpetual scowl, joined him. The second officer's eyes roamed over Marcus with a scrutiny that felt invasive. "Step out of the car," the first officer demanded. "May I ask why?" Marcus's voice remained calm, though his heart began to race. He had read enough about encounters like these to know they could escalate quickly. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," the second officer snapped. "We got a report of a vehicle matching this description involved in a robbery. Now step out." Marcus complied, his hands visible at all times. As he stepped onto the sidewalk, he noticed passers-by slowing down to watch the scene. The officers began to search his car without asking for permission, rummaging through his belongings with little regard for his privacy. Marcus clenched his jaw but said nothing, knowing any protest could be misconstrued. After a few tense minutes, the officers found nothing incriminating. Yet instead of letting him go, they handcuffed him. "You're under arrest for resisting an officer in suspicion of robbery," the first officer declared, his voice devoid of empathy. "Resisting? I didn't resist anything," Marcus protested, his composure slipping. "Tell it to the judge," the second officer sneered. As Marcus was pushed into the back of the squad car, humiliation and anger simmered within him. He knew this wasn't about the robbery, it was about the color of his skin. The officers hadn't seen a young man on his way to meet his mentor. They had seen a black man driving a decent car and decided he must be up to no good. At the station, Marcus was processed like a common criminal. He endured the fingerprinting, the mugshot, and the curt commands to empty his pockets and remove his belt. The sterile walls of the holding cell closed in around him as he sat on the cold metal bench, trying to steady his thoughts. He needed to stay calm and think rationally if he wanted to get out of this mess. Meanwhile, the officers began logging Marcus's details into their system. When they entered his name, a red flag popped up on the screen. The second officer leaned in, his brow furrowing as he read the details. "Hill? As in Senator Elijah Hill?" he muttered. The first officer's eyes widened. "You're kidding." "Look at this," the second officer said, turning the monitor to his partner. Sure enough, Marcus's record was clean, but the familial connection to one of the country's most prominent senators was unmistakable. Senator Elijah Hill wasn't just any politician. He was a towering figure in the fight for justice and equality, a man who had dedicated his career to dismantling systemic racism and holding law enforcement accountable. His fiery speeches and relentless advocacy had earned him both admiration and animosity, and now these officers had arrested his son. "We're screwed," the first officer said, his face pale. Back in the holding cell, Marcus heard the commotion outside but couldn't make out the words. He didn't have to wait long to find out what was happening. Within an hour, the station doors burst open, and in walked Senator Hill, his commanding presence filling the room. Flanked by a team of lawyers and media personnel, he wasted no time. "Where is my son?" he demanded, his voice sharp and unyielding. The officers stammered, tripping over their words as they tried to explain the situation. The senator's piercing gaze silenced them. "Save your excuses," he said. You targeted him because he's black. Don't insult my intelligence by pretending otherwise. The chief of police appeared, summoned by the commotion. Senator Hill, this is a misunderstanding, he began, but the senator cut him off. A misunderstanding? My son was arrested, humiliated, and thrown in a cell for no reason other than your officer's bias. This is not a misunderstanding. This is exactly why I fight every day to reform this broken system. The chief's face turned beet red as cameras flashed, capturing every word. The lawyer stepped forward, presenting evidence of Marcus's clean record and the baseless nature of the accusations. Under pressure, the chief had no choice but to release Marcus immediately. As Marcus stepped out of the holding cell, his father embraced him tightly. For a moment, the stern senator was just a worried father, relieved to see his son unharmed. But the moment passed quickly, and Senator Hill turned back to the officers. This isn't over, he warned. There will be accountability. Over the next few days, the incident made headlines nationwide. Footage of Senator Hill confronting the officers went viral, sparking outrage and calls for action. Activists and community leaders rallied behind the Hill family, demanding justice not just for Marcus, but for all those who had suffered similar fates. The officers involved were suspended pending an investigation, and the police department faced mounting scrutiny. Meanwhile, Senator Hill used the momentum to push forward new legislation aimed at combating racial profiling and police misconduct. The Hill Act, as it came to be known, gained widespread support and reignited the national conversation about systemic racism. For Marcus, the experience was life-changing. Though shaken by the ordeal, he refused to let it define him. Instead, he channeled his energy into activism, joining his father in the fight for justice. Together, they became a formidable force, inspiring others to stand up and demand change. In the end, Marcus's arrest became more than a personal tragedy. It became a turning point in the ongoing battle for equality. And while the scars of that day remained, they served as a reminder of the resilience and strength needed to create a better future.